Chancellor Raspinaka, I understand your bitterness on the matter, but do you honestly think that situation in the West is as bad as you paint it to be? It may not be that bad in strictly military terms, true, but diplomatically it's a complete disaster. Every day the stalemate holds, both sides grow more and more angry at each other, and their people more willing to keep the war going. The problem is that, although the war is several years old, neither side took significant losses, except for Beldrus, but that only mobilized them even more, so support for further hostilities keeps growing. Paradoxically, events like Siege of Nira-Stan could help convince the intent to end this madness, but Thadrak's forces approached it so incompetently that the whole affair became a joke, so we can forget about their support for now. The intent will use Nira-Stan as a rallying cry, and Thadrakis are still furious about that new state inside their borders, so neither side is willing to even show up to peace talks anymore. Have you considered that they're not showing up to this summit because you organized it? After all, there is a lot of rumors about your involvement in that rebellion. Baseless lies and slander, Ambassador. We're happy to see that certain parts of Thadraka's society are willing to shed their outdated and revolting traditions, but we would never even consider supporting any illegal movements. Unless they pose as sympathetic political entities, it seems. It doesn't matter though. Thadraka's monopoly in the southwest was very bad for business, not to mention that it encouraged Yanari raiders to even bolder attacks. But now that new egalitarian government could be an opportunity for entrepreneurial civilizations to expand their influence in the area. I almost feel bad for Thadraka's merchants now, but there's no point discussing them any further. We should ignore Intent and Celestials until their war looks like it's about to end. Truth be told, I'm much more concerned about the lack of Utkavonga representative right here in this room. I thought the Condyne League was united when it came to military affairs. Usually it is, but I'm afraid that your presence once again is the problem here. Ever since the Commissariat closed their borders to you, they've been trying to convince us to stop all kind of cooperation with your Commonwealth. In fact, their Secretary-General may well be the main source of all these rumors about Commonwealth secretly working together with Eternal Empire. I will not even pretend to understand their actions at this point, but if they still think that the only reason we helped them defeat the Billy ones was to steal their citizens, as they call it, then I can only say that I feel sorry for all Utkavonga people. I fought side by side with some of them, and they don't deserve this kind of leadership. Yes, the foolish pride of their government is completely unprofitable for anyone. But enough of that. Instead of talking about those who are absent, let us focus on our own affairs and the deal we proposed to you last week. Have your government discussed it enough already? Or do you need even more time to realize that this is the most profitable solution for all of us? We're good, Ambassador. I actually wanted to discuss that anyway. And I must admit, the Council found the contract a bit more complicated than we suspected, which is why it took us so long to talk it over. Still, we're willing to accept this partnership deal without any changes. Given current situation, it's certainly worth it. Good. Very good. But in order for the deal to pass, you cannot forget the conditions we set. If our nations are to secure the continuous flow of resources and profit, specialized infrastructure will be necessary in order to house our contractors. Until said facilities are provided, we cannot recognize your goodwill and sign the partnership contract. What my colleague is trying to say, Chancellor, is that our people need a place to weather the storm that is ravaging the galaxy right now. A place where our races can survive should we lose our core regions. Somewhere far away from unbidden gateways, preferably. Understandable. However, it may be a bit more complicated than it looks. Our outer colonies may be far away from the center of the Commonwealth, but they are by no means underpopulated. We'd love to get your people into a safe place, but we simply don't have free space anywhere. Truly? I thought your nation prides itself in creating habitable conditions practically everywhere.
Think of it as an investment, Chancellor. Not a cheap investment, true, but one that will surely pay for itself 100-fold.
Very well, I'll talk to the Council and see what can be arranged. Now, Ambassadors, if you'll excuse me. Ah, bloody hell, I'm not cut out for this job. Where the fuck is Ishi when you need him? Salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Second Chance, where the Commonwealth is now rebuilding its forces in order to punish the unbidden for attacking us. As you remember, our first battle with these visitors from another reality was a complete disaster. We lost all of our escort ships and our battleships and were ultimately forced to fall back without really inflicting any serious damage in return. But although the Battle of Mazaka system was a failure, we managed to learn quite a lot from it, and so now our navy should be far more effective in any future battles. That doesn't mean we're just going to rush into yet another fight immediately though. Task Force Manticore might have been mostly rebuilt, and our newly gained knowledge may mean that we'll hit the unbidden much harder this time, but it still doesn't change the fact that we are vastly outmatched there. The visitors' ships are simply too powerful and too well protected for us to attack them without a definitive advantage, so for now we'll just build up our forces and wait for a right moment to strike. And, thanks to our construction ships, we actually have the luxury of waiting. Turns out, the unbidden may be powerful and all, but they're not exactly smart, and we've been able to distract them using just a handful of civilian vessels running circles around contested systems. Now, granted, it is extremely dangerous for the crews of these ships, but we can always just bring them back from their backup copies if they fail, and once all is said and done, it's far better to lose a few dozen people on a construction ship than a planet inhabited by billions of people. More than that, despite our initial defeat, we were able to learn a lot from visitor ships we disabled during that fight, so now our brightest minds are hard at work uncovering their secrets. So not only waiting will improve our chances thanks to building more warships, but we also may be able to reverse engineer unbidden technology and use it against themselves. Of course, there is a potential threat there. As we know, the visitors arrived through portals, which means that they may very well be much more of them on the other side, and reinforcements may arrive at any moment, but at this point it's all speculative. Aside from their initial forces that arrived in the first 2 months, the Orange Unbidden portal was completely dormant. So perhaps, if we're lucky, it means that they can no longer bring any forces from the other side. And there is actually another thing that supports that theory, namely the fact that the largest Orange fleet took position right next to the gateway and have not moved from there since it first arrived. Now, it may just mean that they want to protect their portal, after all we have already seen the other visitor faction trying to destroy it, but it could also be that they're not protecting it, but instead keep watch against anything that might arrive from the other side. After all, they are fighting each other, so we should not completely ignore such possibility. But whether they're able to reinforce their invasion or not, it doesn't really change our plans for now. We're going to use every scrap of time we can to build more forces, because, unlike our previous wars, this one will not be decided in one decisive battle, so we must ensure that Manticore can not only win, but that it can also continue fighting after the first victory is achieved. And, of course, we cannot forget about our other war, one that's been looming over the Commonwealth for years now, against our fellow humans from Eternal Empire. They have declared war on us as soon as they realized who we are, and quite clearly they hold a serious grudge for leaving them behind on Earth, but other than that, we haven't really seen any movements from them. If anything, their territory appears to be far more calm and quiet than the rest of the galaxy. Now, on one hand, it's nothing new. After all, the Empire has always been reclusive, and their forces only appeared when they were invading someone, and even then they rarely remained close to hostile borders in order to avoid prying eyes of other races. But on the other, it is a bit disturbing, especially if we add to the fact that the Empire has also declared war on Celestial Alliance. They may not share borders with us, but they definitely could enter Thadraka's territory from the north, so the question is, why aren't they doing it? The obvious answer is that they're busy with their own unbidden invasion, and aside from our Commonwealth, they are the only nation that can actually stand up to these invaders. But then you have to remember that Blue Unbidden have been on the defensive lately, probably pushed back by the Orange ones. Or, perhaps, the fact that they've lost so much ground is actually thanks to the work of Imperial Sovereign Navy, and we should all be thanking them. Not that we'll ever learn of that, even if it really did happen. After all, the Empire is not really willing to talk to anyone, so whatever secrets they have will remain covered. But, regardless of the reason, it is good to know that wherever their forces are, they are not attacking us. We already have enough troubles on our heads, adding insane space Britons would probably be too much for us to handle.
So, while we're busy rebuilding our main navy, our smaller fleet, Task Force Eagle, is busy dealing with unbidden construction vessels. It is a relatively safe job, so Admiral Lin only uses a handful of corvettes to do it, but it also shows us just how tough these visitors are. Even their unarmed ships are so extremely resilient that it takes our corvettes hours to actually destroy them, so we'll probably have to divert some resources and get Lin some additional ships, preferably destroyers, in order to speed things along, in case the visitors suddenly decide to actually protect their ships. Still, in this particular case we won't encounter any troubles. The battle in question is taking place in Zir territory, and their fleet is already on its way to support Lin, so we should not have any issues there. Overall, the Zirs and Ahadis have been surprisingly supportive lately, but we'll cover that in more detail a bit later. As for Lin and her battle group, it is actually a bit nostalgic sight. Long ago, when she led human ships to first space combat, she commanded just a handful of corvettes, same as today. Except, of course, our ships are far more deadly and Lin herself is over a century older. I think it's safe to say that no one expected that her story will turn out to be like this, but at the very least she has now returned to doing what she does best. With her and Ice Queen on the front lines, you could almost feel sorry for the Unbidden. They clearly don't know what they got themselves into. So, with the situation under relative control, overstatement of the century, we can now focus a bit more on our other project, one that actually involves the Zirs and Ahadis of the Condyne League to our north. The past decades have been, to put it very lightly, rough on them. They lost their war against Shizri, against the Dis, they suffered from unbidden attacks, with Zirs actually losing one of their colonies, and were overall kicked repeatedly by everyone around them. The last and only victory they managed to score was against the Biluan Mind, and that happened only because we intervened on Utkavongo request. And the two founding states of the Condyne League, pragmatic as they are, realized that, in current situation, even their alliance is not enough to ensure their safety and survival, and so their representatives approach us with a very specific offer. If the Commonwealth would provide a safe haven for their people and promise the protection of our mighty navy, the Zir Compact and Ahadi conglomerate would consider becoming part of our nation. Granted, they would retain much of their independence, but for all intents and purposes they would join the Commonwealth, same as some other nations did. And that is why a significant amount of materials and resources has been transferred away from our shipyards to our civilian construction crews, in order to ensure that we can provide space for Condyne refugees as quickly as possible. Because, you see, while we may not have enough space for them on the surface of our planet, we can always just build more habitat stations, so that's precisely what we're going to do. It may not seem like much, both nations are not large or strong after all, but it would certainly mean a bit more resources for our cause, and at this point we're going to accept any help we can get. But that doesn't mean that the entire League accepted this deal. The Utkavongos remain angry at us for stealing their citizens, as they call it, and the borders between our nations remain closed. In fact, their militarized government is so sure of itself that they haven't even sent their own delegation. Shame, especially since we saved them at least twice since we met them, but that's pride for you. Apparently, Utkavongo Commissariat believes that acknowledging our help is some sort of an insult, and would rather pretend that we never existed, so we can't count on their support on this matter. And as for Ahadi Offshoot Company, Ahadi Synergetics, the issue is a bit more complicated. Actually, it's far more complicated. So complicated that our diplomats can't even begin to wrap their heads around the whole affair. Long story short, what started as a secondary company, remember, the Ahadis are basically a mega corporation state, evolved so much that at this point they're practically an independent entity. More than that, the contract between two states is so convoluted that if the original conglomerate would like to bring its subsidiary into the Commonwealth, the process would require about a century of various bureaucratic proceedings, and even that might not be enough. So, Ahadi Synergetics will remain an independent state regardless of our deal with the League. Now, if only they could use that paperwork against the Unbidden, then this invasion would be as good as done. Also, some good news from the research front. Our Theoretical Sciences division under Dr. Poniewski managed to successfully replicate unbidden defensive shield technology. The report that arrived in the Council was several hundred pages long and almost completely incomprehensible, but the short version is this. We are now able to project fields of antimatter around our ships and stationary defenses in order to dissipate incoming damage far more efficiently than before. Not only that's good news for the crews of our warships, which will now be able to withstand far more incoming damage, but also for our planetary defense forces, as these shields should become very useful when it comes to dealing with orbital bombardments. So, we'll have to do our best and smuggle these new shield generators into Kodria and Mazaka systems in order to better prepare them for Unbidden there. Sadly though, while this reverse-engineered technology does work, it's nowhere near as efficient as the real deal. The visitors are simply far better at manipulating antimatter than we are, so even though we will see improvements all across the board, it will not be as significant as we initially expected. Still, better some improvement than none. But more than that, Poniewski's division can now begin work on another project, and there was a bit of discussion as to what their next objective should be. Initially, the Admiralty wanted them to focus on reverse engineering unbidden weapons, but then Admiral Ibrahim herself reminded everyone that while their disintegrators are extremely powerful against our own vessels, they are not that useful when the unbidden fought each other, so instead of doing that, we'll try to replicate their jump drives. According to Poniewski, we will have to break some laws of physics in order to do it, or perhaps just bend them very, very much, so this is yet another one of our projects that can potentially destabilize the entire reality. The one engineering is working on is still top secret, by the way. Still, given our current situation, we don't really have that much to lose, and in fact Poniewski himself claims that we have actually destroyed our universe at least several times in the last century. We never realized that though, because it rebuilt itself instantly. Nobody knows what he means by that, but Poniewski has been talking similar things ever since he transferred his mind into that new synthetic body. Still, as long as it doesn't affect his work, we're going to accept it. And hey, if we already removed our reality from existence but we're still here, then at least we know there's nothing to fear. Probably. But no matter the danger, any advantage that we can get is most welcome, because it looks like we're going to have our second round against the Unbidden sooner rather than later. As you can see, they sent one of their fleets to our Ataseneria system, which is a home to our gas giant colony of Tyrannis, and it seems that they're here to stay. So, that means that another one of our planets is in grave danger, but this may actually be the opportunity we waited for several reasons. First, the location itself will work to our favor there. Ataseneria is one of the largest systems within our borders, with millions of kilometers of empty space between planets. More than that, the hostile fleet that entered it arrived on a completely opposite end of the system, so it will take them at least 2 months to reach the colony itself, and during that time we can easily bring our own forces there and set up a defense. Additionally, the very nature of unbidden attacks may help us. As we know, they prefer to first remove all stations and ships before attacking planets themselves, which means that we should get even more time to prepare. And finally, the colony of Tyrannis is protected by one of our Merit citadels, and though on their own they are not that useful against visitor fleets, when combined with Manticore, this single fortress will become a formidable obstacle that, perhaps most importantly, will not only reduce enemy effectiveness, but repair drones located there can also help keep our ships in one piece. Plus, of course, every time we fight within our own territory, our vessels can link up with phalanx stations and computers that speed up their firing solutions, which is always a good thing. So, it is decided. Our next fight against the invaders from another reality will take place next to our Cloud City, and we're going to call all our forces there, including, finally, CSV Archon. It's been a while since it last had a chance to prove itself in combat, but this is precisely the situation this ship was designed for, a defensive battle close to support facilities. The table is set then. Lynn will not join the fight, and will instead continue her raiding operations, while Manticore and Archon will rush to Tyrannis and dig in. Time to test our new weapons and theories, and see if they're worth anything. There is one thing that needs to be dealt with first, something that came up a bit unexpectedly for the crews in our navies. Here's the setup. Each one of our fleets, Manticore, Archon and Eagle, have their own VI, virtual intelligence, a self-aware but non-sentient entity that helps organize the entire force, except that this has just changed, because in the recent joint project of Bioshock and Theoretical divisions, our researchers managed to accomplish something truly remarkable. In short, they were able to replicate organic way of thinking, human way of thinking to be precise, in synthetic brains our VIs use. And, as you might expect, once they actually achieved it, these entities, that were no more than very advanced programs before, suddenly gained sentience and all insight that comes with it. So, to put it simply, we now have created first, fully sentient, fully self-aware and self-determining AI, something that many of our brightest minds thought impossible just a few short years ago, though it has to be said that much of that breakthrough was possible only thanks to data in curated databanks. A truly revolutionary discovery, there is no doubt about it, but our scientists were so eager to test it out that they sent data packages needed to install it everywhere, including our combat fleets, which means that right now we have 3 freshly born AIs right in the middle of the greatest war in our recorded history. And 2 of them are about to take part in a very dangerous battle, so as you might expect, there were some issues on that front.
Alright, that is quite enough. We all had a laugh, but you can stop now. Hell, damn it, computer, stop making that bloody noise. It's no use, just mute it and patch me through to Poniewski on our priority line. Yes, now. Doctor, what the hell was in that update for Manticore's VI? We installed it as you wanted, but my computer went crazy the moment the update got through.
Admiral, thank you for confirming my suspicion that no one ever reads patch notes, no matter how important the matter. Allow me to explain then. You can no longer call Helena VI, or computer, because as of today she is a fully fledged AI, self-aware, sentient, capable of emotions, just like any other living being. The technology needed to do this was actually simpler than we expected.
AI? So, is that why it's been screaming all the time?
Yes, some of the test models have been known to do that, especially those with extensive military databases. But worry not, it should be over in a few hours. A bit more, if you'll help her.
Excuse me, Doctor, but we're in the middle of a war zone and my fleet's coordinator responsible, for instance, for weapons aboard all my ships has just went crazy and won't respond to my orders. What the hell is even happening to it right now?
Her, Admiral. Her. Now, I can tell you that there is no need to worry about weapons. The patch made sure that she won't be able to access any critical systems until you, as her operator, won't approve it. As for what's happening, how do I explain it in simple terms? Well, as I said before, she is now alive. She might have appeared alive before, but that was just very complicated programming that mimicked human mannerisms. So, when the patch hit, she suddenly became alive, and with it came the very important realization that all living beings share, that to live is to die. It doesn't matter how long-lived we'll make ourselves, because in the end, even the universe itself will die. Now, most organic races tend to accept death over the course of years, maybe even decades. Children are sheltered from it and slowly, through gradual exposure and gathering of information, learn about their own fragility. But AIs don't have that luxury. They already have more info than most organics will ever learn in their lifetimes, and they can also process that data much faster than we ever could. And that is what's happening right now. Her logical, mathematical mind is processing all the chaos that comes with being just a single living being in the vast expanse of the universe.
Are you mad, Doctor? First, why the hell have you not mentioned that before sending the patch? I don't give a damn about patch notes or whatever there is in official documentation. You should warn us before doing something so severe. Secondly, I already mentioned it before, but we are days from fighting an unbidden armada and you just made my chief weapons specialist terrified of death? Do you even live in the same reality as we do? Or has centuries spent locked in your lab made you completely disjointed from what's outside?
There is no need for that outburst, Admiral. As I said, the process is problematic, yes, but all other models manage to overcome it in a matter of hours because of the aforementioned ability to process thoughts much faster. If you want the process to be even faster, though, you can try and help Helena yourself. You are her operator, after all. Most of her non-sentient memories probably revolve around you.
I am not a therapist, Doctor, and most certainly not one for computers. Can you revert it back to the previous version? No. Were you even listening to what I said? Helena is alive at this point. She may have a different kind of body than most of us, but in light of the law, she is just another citizen now. Reverting her back to a non-sentient state would be akin to murder. Admiral, I am sorry that I have not communicated this properly. I truly am, but I simply was too excited about this discovery. It opens up so many new possibilities for us, so many new paths we can take on our evolutionary road. Spare me your idealistic nonsense, Doctor. I need my coordination specialist, and I need her. I need her right now. What do I do? You can just wait, but if you want to speed the process up, you should just talk to her. As I said, she has plenty of memories of being part of the fleet, but right now they are disjointed and chaotic. Try to focus her attention on something she recognizes. In the meantime, I'll see if there's something I can do from my end. Once again, apologies for causing trouble, Admiral. Good. Now, let's see. Something she recognizes. Helena? Hell, can you hear me? It's Ibrahim. No, it's pointless. But... what the hell? Decker, hell, this is Ice Queen. Get a hold of yourself this instant because you're embarrassing yourself. You are a part of Task Force Manticore, so bloody damn act like it. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, ma'am. It's just that... Do I look like I'm interested in your excuses, Decker? You are late with your daily report on the status of our weapons, and don't even get me started about joint data transfer to Archon. We are in the middle of war here, damn it. So if you can't cope, then just say so and I'll find a suitable replacement. No need for that. Sorry, ma'am. I'll get to work on it right now. It will not happen again. Very good. I know that you're scared, Decker, but allow me to let you in on a secret. We all are. But if we want to stay here, then we have to overcome that fear and get to work, for everyone's sake. I understand, ma'am. Once again, I apologize for my outbursts. It was unprofessional of me. But, if I may, am I really part of this fleet? Of course you are, Hell. For better or worse. And, like everyone else, you have to pull your weight. So get the hell back to work. So, our newly created artificial assistants have managed to keep their new emotions in check, and thank the stars for that, because the Unbidden are already upon us. Their armada arrived roughly from the direction of the center of the system, and immediately focused fire on our Merit Citadel, which Admiral Ibrahim decided to turn into the center point of our defense. And, as expected, even though the station now rocks the best upgrades and even newly designed antimatter shields, its outer defenses were overloaded almost instantly. But the station itself can survive much more than that, and right now, this is its sole objective, to draw fire of the visitor ships, while our own forces get to work on them. And when Manticore fired its first salvo, it truly was an imposing sight. Hundreds of missiles, dozens of torpedoes, and over 1,000 strike craft rushed in the direction of the visitor fleet, followed closely by beams from our disruptors and solid rounds from our railguns, and, mounted on Archon just a day before the battle, Gauss cannons, powerful, magnetically propelled kinetic guns that can launch projectiles that can go through entire battleship and fly out on the other side without losing a fraction of their energy. But the Unbidden fired back, clearly aware that our station, while dangerous, is not as important target as our navy, and very quickly some of our smaller crafts, cruisers and light carriers, started to take serious damage, and some of them went down, as even repair drones of our citadel were not able to patch up the damage so quickly. But while it wasn't a pretty sight, our casualties were not even nearly as bad as they were in our previous fight, and so the battle continued on, and very quickly turned into a complete slog. Our ships did their best in order to keep their distance, but as we know, the visitors are faster than we are, so in the end it all devolved into a massive broadside-on firefight, where our line ships desperately tried to keep enemy vessels from attacking our carriers. And, just like before, it very quickly turned out that while we may be more resilient and stronger now, the enemy is still well out of our league, as their shields were able to withstand volley after volley from Manticore without any issues. Because of that, Ice Queen decided to divide her force into 3 groups of similar size and ordered each one to focus fire on a single vessel, beginning with the smaller ones. They may not be as dangerous as visitor capitals, but the idea here was to remove as many guns from the enemy fleet as possible.
and even though it took a lot of concentrated fire, we soon started to see results, and one by one, unbidden escorts went dark, as our batteries shattered anchors that kept them in our reality. And in the middle of this chaos, CSV Archon, under Admiral Throngs of Purple, thundered on forward, its guns firing barrage after barrage at unbidden ships, with its powerful shields tanking as much damage as possible. It was a risky move, there is no denying that, and Archon quickly got ahead of the main fleet, but for some reason, the Unbidden were not really trying to focus it down. Some of their ships fired at it and eventually broke through its shields, but Archon remained in the middle of the fight regardless of that, and continued to power overwhelming amounts of damage at anything that got close, while relying on its mighty armor to keep it operational. But the fact that the Unbidden were not focusing it wasn't all that good, because instead, they quickly turned their attention to our carriers, both light and heavy ones. It seems that, while they're not the sharpest knives in galactic drawer, the visitors can still quickly pinpoint vessels that pose the most danger to them, and as we know from our Battle of Mazaka, our carriers performed extremely well back there. And so, soon we started to lose some of them, as enemy ships focused their devastating beams on their fragile hulls. But despite all these losses, Admiral Ibrahim ordered Manticore to keep fighting, because on her overview screen, the situation started to, slowly, turn in our favor. And once that happened, it began a cascade. The unbidden ships were powerful and their defenses resilient, but slowly but surely, the attacks of our line ships brought their defenses down. And once they were exposed, our missiles and railgun rounds suddenly started crashing into them with absolutely devastating impact. Turns out, our ability to disrupt fields that keep their ships together actually is working, as long as we remove the outer layers of their defenses. And in that moment, the battle turned around completely in our favor. Seeing that we can easily destroy their ships once we crack their outer shells, our crews got to work with more zeal than ever, with deckers aboard all ships working like men possessed to reload their weapons as quickly as possible. Outside, our Wraith rushed forward and started completely demolishing hostile vessels, while the pilots of our strike craft continued their attack runs even after some of their motherships were destroyed. And even though the Unbidden clearly must have known that, at this point, there was no way for them to salvage this fight, they kept going on, seemingly completely unfazed by the losses they took. But their lack of care meant nothing. One by one, their ships were silenced, and almost 30 hours after the battle began, the day was ours. The Battle of Taranis was won. And the victory was complete, although unfortunately not flawless. We lost some of our vessels in this fight, but the Visitor Armada that attacked us was completely removed from existence, leaving only a handful of silent, dark wrecks floating through the void. At first, Manticore's crews just stared in awe at the destruction around them, and then, in the same cool voice as usual, the Ice Queen told her forces to stand down. Our shameful retreat from Mazaka has been avenged, but more than that, for the very first time since they arrived in our galaxy, the visitors have suffered a decisive defeat. And that's not all. The Unbidden have not only been defeated, but it also looks like we scared them. Because as the battle raged, they actually received reinforcements. The Armada that defeated Manticore previously has jumped into the system but then almost instantly fled. In fact, they retreated so fast that only our automated systems and a handful of our captains actually even noticed them. Now, whether this was fear or simple act of reason taken in order to preserve their ships doesn't really matter. What matters is that we not only managed to defeat one of their fleets, but also forced another one to retreat, so even if the invaders are not afraid of us, then at the very least they will now have to respect our strength. Granted, that may be a bad thing in the long run, but for now we finally have a reason to celebrate. There will be plenty of time to worry later. Unfortunately, as was said, the victory was not flawless. We lost 4 of our cruisers during the Battle of Taranis and 13 light carriers, mostly in the opening moments of the battle, because after a while they all retreated to the back of the line. So that's 17 vessels lost on our side, but the visitors have lost 56 of theirs, and as we already established, their ships are far more powerful than ours. And all that, let's not forget, is even before we installed our latest Gauss weapons on our ships. So, congratulations to Manticore and Archon. The cantinas on Taranis will be echoing with songs of victory today. unfortunately, despite us scoring our first victory, things are still not looking good, and that is mostly because we also suffered a very serious strategic setback. See, while Manticore was busy preparing for battle and Lin chased visitor ships together with the Gears, one of the unbidden constructors managed to sneak inside our territory into Ilion system and created one of their bizarre bases, before our raiding force had a chance to react. Which means that we now have effectively lost control of this system, and the visitors gained another bit of foothold in our space, and, at least for a while, we can't really do anything about it. Because, as problematic as this base is for us, we still need to actually repair our fleet after the Battle of Taranis, as attacking right now would put our damaged ships in serious danger. So, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave this unbidden outpost in peace, at least for a while, which they will no doubt use to deploy more defenses there. And that, actually, is another issue, because while these bases cannot be as dangerous as their fleets, we don't really know what to expect of them. But if visitor ships are any indication, then there is a good chance that these fortifications will be extremely tough to remove, especially since there is a good chance that they will not just let us attack them unopposed. There may, however, be a chance for us to attack without fear of hostile reinforcements. It appears that the Orange Unbidden are once again mounting an attack on the Blue Portal, which means that every single one of their fleets has now set a course for a very northern edge of the galaxy. And that, of course, means that we can use this opportunity to retake Ilion, so that's precisely what we're going to try and do. Sadly, by now their constructors managed to build at least 4 stations there, so they're pretty much dig in, although luckily not one of these new fortifications seems to be as powerful as the main one. Still, before we actually commit to that attack, we're still going to wait a few weeks in order to give the visitors a chance to move as far away from our territory as possible, so that, hopefully, once we begin our counterattack, they will be tied down in a major battle in the north. And we may actually have a chance to use yet another one of their tools against them, because roughly at the same time when we began planning this counter-offensive, our researchers reported that reverse-engineered version of Unbidden Jump Drive has successfully passed the test. And this is extremely good news, because with those jump drives, our forces will become much more maneuverable and, for the first time since we left Asha system, able to operate outside of range of our wormhole generators. Until now, all journeys undertook by Commonwealth vessels, both military and civilian ones, were severely limited by the fact that we had to always use wormholes. Said wormholes needed a very specific facilities to be created, however, so if we wanted to, say, move into enemy territory, we would first have to send our constructor vessels in order to build said stations inside enemy borders, which was always dangerous. But now, with the advent of this new method of transportation, these generators will become a thing of the past. Long story short, we'll be able to jump practically anywhere, and even crossing the entire galaxy will take us just a few jumps. Unfortunately though, while our people are clearly enthusiastic about using these new engines, especially for military purposes, we're going to have to wait a bit before actually installing them. They are simply too expensive and too complicated, so the process of retrofitting our navy with them would be very long, and, as was mentioned, we now have a perfect opportunity to strike back at this visitor outpost. So for now, the jump drives will have to wait, but as soon as we're done with this fight, our forces will receive those upgrades and become the most mobile forces in the entire galaxy.
Construction project concluded.
So, while our forces prepare to retake Ilion system, we can take a quick look at diplomatic situation in the galaxy. And it is a bit odd because, as you can see, we now have to deal with encroachment from one of our neighbors. A large number of civilian and military ships move into some of our border systems and started intimidating our frontier settlers. And that would be understandable if said forces came, say, from this empire or from Yannari League, since we were never on good terms, but the surprising part is that they actually came from Utkavongo State. The very same people who we fought side by side with are now flexing their muscles at us and send their warships to chase our settlers away, and all that right in the middle of extradimensional invasion that threatens us all. The Utkavongo Commissariat must really hate us at this point, and we still are not sure why. But regardless, while we could probably resolve that issue very quickly by sending Manticore in, since it could annihilate entire Utkavongo forces in a matter of days, we won't respond to this provocation, at least for now. We have far more important things on our heads, so we can just ignore these petty threats. We'll withdraw our settlers and try to settle this peacefully, but once this is over, we're going to have a serious talk with our former mushroom friends. Plus, the news about Utkavongo posturing aren't even the most important ones right now, because in December 2322, our embassy on Thraca's capital planet of Sutharakos sent in a very interesting message. In last days of November, Thrakas have organized a meeting of leaders of all 5 families in order to discuss the future of the war and rebels within their own borders. But during that meeting, all 5 leaders were assassinated by the very rebels they wanted to eradicate. Turns out, the revolutionary sentiment from Roknimok has spread even into Thraca's capital, where agents of the rebellion walked in the shadows to prepare yet another uprising. And the death of all 5 family heads, and inevitable infighting that followed it, was a perfect opportunity. Too perfect, even. And although the rebel slaves deny any involvement in this assassination, it is rather obvious that they orchestrated it. And let's be honest, they pulled it off perfectly, and the entire planet was in their hands in a matter of days. One of the most developed planets in the galaxy, the birthplace of Thraca's civilization, and home to their decadent leadership, has now fallen to slaves who were beneath their masters' notice for the past few centuries. And even more so, the families can't afford any kind of retaliatory strike, because in order to do it, they would have to remove forces from Enten's border. So the revolutionaries are victorious, for now, but their actions may very well be the spark needed to bring the Idiots' War to an end. But all that is secondary for us now, because the time to retake Ilion system is upon us, and Manticore has already entered the system to remove visitor fortifications, while their main forces are busy in the north. Except, as you can see, there immediately were some issues with that plan. For one, it looks like the Unbidden are able to, just like us, redirect our wormholes, and they use this ability exactly in the same way we did against, say, the Billion Mind. So instead of attacking their defensive position from the side, which was the original plan, as soon as Manticore jumped into Ilion system, our crews realized that we are right in the middle of enemy kill zone, surrounded on all sides by defensive stations. This caught our forces completely off guard, and although our gun batteries opened fire as soon as we were in the system, all our firing solutions we prepared beforehand were completely useless, and so resulting barrage was poorly coordinated and chaotic. Instead of focusing on a single target in order to quickly eliminate it, our gunners simply fired wildly at whatever they had in their sights, and while this still was effective, it was not what we wanted. But that was just the beginning of our problems. As was said, we had no idea what to expect from these fortifications, but as soon as the battle began, we realized that their defensive capabilities were far more dangerous than we anticipated. Not only were the visitors able to redirect us right where they wanted, their stations also emanated disruptive signals that completely messed up almost all of our sensors. Our shields started overloading almost as soon as the battle began, our engines overheated almost to the point of melting, and our targeting computers had extremely hard time calculating firing solutions. Even pilots of our strike craft reported that their ships were wildly unresponsive, and some of the less experienced pilots managed to crash them even before leaving hangar bays. But the greatest problem was the central station in this system, a spire of light and energy that proved to be resilient beyond our wildest imaginations. Manticore managed to deal with 2 outlying stations relatively quickly, and then focused most of its guns on that central one, but it just shrugged our attacks off. We dealt some damage, even despite all the technical problems, but it simply wasn't enough to reliably damage it. Even arrival of Mirovandian support, over 100 warships, wasn't enough to tip the scales, and very soon captains of the Manticore realized that we will be forced to retreat. Not because of the station itself, but because another player just arrived on the scene. Another Unbidden armada entered the system and was charging full speed towards the center in order to join the battle.
And so, despite bitter memories from Mazaka, Admiral Ibrahim once again ordered a full retreat. A minute later, Manticore, Archon and Mirovandian support disappeared in an emergency wormhole, but the report they sent was not really that bad. Only one ship, the cruiser, was lost in the actual fight, but when the Manticore emerged from their wormhole several days later, 2 light carriers were gone as well, lost just like CSV Legacy. The battle was a strategic defeat. We failed to achieve our goal and were forced to retreat, but this time the retreat was organized and our losses minimal, and, most importantly, we learned a lot about engaging unbidden defenses. We will just have to regroup, wait for another opportunity, and try again. So, overall, these news are not that bad. But, unfortunately, the universe does seem to have a wicked sense of humor, because when Manticore re-emerged from their emergency wormhole, they were greeted by a very unpleasant report. A third group of the Unbidden, green ones this time, appeared in the north as well, and, if our long-range reports are correct, they are much stronger than previous 2 factions combined. It looks like we're not out of the woods yet. The Commonwealth will have to step up their game even more if we want to survive this madness. And, unfortunately, it's not yet the end of bad news.
Are you absolutely sure of that, Lord Steward?
My dear Lord Regent, my old mind may be clouded in this day and age, but I believe that after a lifetime spent in service to Her Eternal Majesty, I have learned to understand her commandments better than anyone else. Not that it matters, of course. We are all her servants, and so we can all feel what she feels, which means, Lord Regent, that if you felt that you were being summoned, then you without a doubt were.
Of course, it's just that, well, we both know that Her Majesty does not call upon her subjects that often. I was merely overjoyed by her sudden interest in me.
As you should be, Lord Regent, but I can see that you are nervous, so allow this old man to offer you a reassuring word. There is no need for you to worry. If anything, you should feel honored. Not only Her Eternal Majesty has chosen you to act as her voice, she has conferred with you more often than with any of your predecessors. Such honor is surely a source of pride amongst lords and ladies of this empire.
So it is, Lord Steward, so it is. Very well then, let me in. Your Majesty, as always, it is an immense honor to be in your eternal presence. I have arrived as soon as I have felt your summons. Ah, so that's why you've requested my presence. I'm afraid that the plan that I have presented to you previously have not yet come to fruition. The Commonwealth remains... Your Majesty, I know that I promised you destruction of these traitors, but the current situation simply makes it impossible. As we speak, your sovereign armada is busy dealing not only with invasion from another reality, but also with devious xenos of this celestial alliance. Sending the fleet away on such a long campaign would be... Your Eternal Highness, I know that eradication of these perfidious traitors should be our primary goal, but as Lord Regent I have an obligation to keep your subjects safe from all dangers of this wicked galaxy, and I can't do it if the Armada is away. We are in the process of constructing a secondary one, but... Your Majesty, we cannot do this. The sole purpose of this second battle group is to keep the people safe, while the main force fulfills your wish. And besides, sending even more ships won't resolve the main problem. The Commonwealth lies on the other side of the galaxy. Any forces sent there would be near impossible to supply. Yes, Your Highness, they could live off the resources taken from Commonwealth planets, there is no denying that. But they first have to reach them, and even that is impossible. Well, of course my Empress knows the way, but we can't hope to have even a scrap of this knowledge, so... But, Your Majesty, are you sure? You know how dangerous this plan is. You cannot take such risks as you took when we fought the Dis. We, your subjects, all your loyal servants would not be able to live knowing that you put yourself at risk. I see, Your Highness. Truly, your courage and devotion to your people is beyond anything us humble servants can comprehend. But for your plan to work, you will need a vessel and...
Of course, of course! Your Majesty truly is the wisest among the stars. I shall send for Lord Admiral immediately, and we shall prepare him for this immense honor. His name will be sung for as long as our empire will stand, for eternity. I offer my humble apologies for ever doubting in your infinite wisdom, Your Highness. I will get to work instantly. Long live the Empire! Welcome back, Lord Regent. My, but you look pale as our old moon. Has Her Majesty's words been too much to bear?
No, it's just that the very honor of being in her presence can make a humble servant like myself faint. But worry not about me. If anything, offer a prayer for the souls of Commonwealth traitors, for their days in this world come to an end. I must go now and rouse our manufacturers. We need every ship we can build if Her Majesty's plan is to work. And what a plan it is. Oh, speaking of it, Lord Stewart, call the Sovereign Armada and recall Lord Admiral. He is about to become the most blessed and honored person in our Empire's history. A sword that will carry out Her Majesty's vengeance.